In today's video, we unbox Battle Masters, the epic game of fantasy battles. This ambitious mass-market box set is a veritable treasure trove of vintage GW-inspired goodness. Well, hi folks, this is Lee from skirmishwargames.com. Welcome to the channel. So Lynn, can you guess what we're doing today?
You're going to finally let me see what's inside the Battle Masters box?
That's right. Today we're unboxing a copy of Milton Bradley's Battle Masters game, the epic game of fantasy battles produced by Milton Bradley back in 1992 in collaboration with Games Workshop. So back in the day, like in the late 80s and the early 90s, GW and Milton Bradley had worked on a couple of different games, including Space Crusade and Hero Quest, which is kind of their dungeon crawler. And we're going to get into this at some point. But for today, we're mostly using this Hero Quest box for comparison, so you can see how much bigger Battle Masters was. So just looking at the Battle Masters box art here, what I'm assuming Milton Bradley was trying to do is somehow capture the essence, the appeal of games like Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and somehow boil it down, homogenize, and repackage it to make it more palatable for a mass market audience. But at the same time, GW probably wanted a gateway game that might get kids who were playing D&D and Risk and things like that interested in GW products. So I'm not sure what the game's original MSRP was, but I purchased this used copy of Battle Masters on eBay for about $125, which included the shipping. I think the shipping portion of the transaction was about $25, which doesn't seem too far out of line given the weight and the size of this box and the fact that they had to pack it pretty well to kind of keep it intact. So there's a lot of stuff in here, and the cardboard box is starting to give way. The corners are starting to give out. So I feel like this is a good time to sort of document this on video because it's kind of a neat part of Games Workshop gaming history. So there's lots of copies of Battle Masters available on eBay at various price points. This particular one was advertised as 99% complete. So most of the stuff should be in there, though I don't expect everything will be on the sprues. As I mentioned, the original box is starting to break down a little bit, so it's probably good that we're doing this video now because the box art is fading, but you can see that it still has more than a hint of its original awesomeness. I think back in the days of lead minis, if I'd received something like this for Christmas, I would have been pretty stoked. With all those plastic figures, I think there's over 100 of them in here, but no doubt after playing Battle Masters a few times, I would have repurposed all those minis for other things, like probably swords and spells or whatever else we were playing back then. And I guess if I'm being honest, that's kind of my mindset now. I don't really have an overwhelming desire to play Battle Masters the game as originally intended, but I have a lot of curiosity about what's in here, and I have some thoughts as to what I might do with 100 GW-inspired plastic figures, assuming that they're of good quality and assuming that they're the right scale. And even if I was so inclined to play Battle Masters as originally intended, the game is meant to be played on a 4.5 by 4.5 foot battle mat, and that is frankly just a little bit larger than our standard gaming tables. So I don't know how we would do that. Maybe we'd have to play on the kitchen table or go back to playing on the floor, but that probably won't happen in the near future. Really, our plan here today is just to kind of open this up and take a look at the gaming history inside, and also check out those plastic minis and see if we can repurpose them for maybe some games of Mordheim or some Warhammer Fantasy Skirmish that could use some vintage GW-inspired minis. So that is our plan today. So I guess, Lynn, we should kind of get to it here. So quickly, before we do that, let's take a quick look at the cover art here because it's pretty spectacular, even though it's faded and we got some water damage and stuff. So obviously we got some Bretonnian type characters here. I see some wolf riders. I see an orc. I see a big ogre. And I know there's some Chaos Warriors and some Chaos Archers, and there's a Beast Man. So I think most or all of those type of characters are represented in the miniatures that we're going to get as part of our 100 finely detailed figures and giant 4.5 foot battle mat. All right, let's give this a flip here. Okay, here's official proof developed with Games Workshop right there. Battle Masters. Welcome to the world of Battle Masters, the epic game where you command mighty armies locked on a legendary conflict of good versus evil. The noble Imperial Army is ready to meet the forces of chaos. You and your opponent must strategically guide 25 army units featuring over 100 finely detailed figures across the gigantic 4.5 by 5 foot battle mat. Beware, ditches, marshes, river fords, and a great border tower lie before you. Okay, so this is, I think, what we're going to get. So we got an Ogre Champion, Wolf Riders, Champions of Chaos, 10 Orcs, 10 Goblins, 10 Beastmen, 10 Chaos Warriors, 10 Chaos Archers. That is something I haven't seen before. A Mighty Cannon, 5 Crossbowmen, 10 Imperial Archers, 15 Men-at-Arms, 3 Lord Knights, and is that 9 Imperial Knights? So that's quite a lot of stuff. And as you can see, there it is all on the mat. And one of the things from the mat is they haven't painted any of the figures here because they assume, yeah, you know, kid gets this. He's not going to have all the paints and everything. But the game does come with decals. And so that's putting a splash of color on all those unpainted figures. And it looks like they're in different colors of plastic too. So we'll have to check that out. All right, so the time has come. Let's do our flip here. And this is a used copy, so a lot of this stuff has probably been repacked for shipping. Okay, well.
I like that they're in one piece.
Yeah, right off the bat, you can see these are one-piece figures, and they look a little bit similar to these old 1992 GW orcs. So it looks like these Battlemasters orcs have flat shields, so that must be to accommodate the decals. So we got some orcs, we got some goblins.
I like this big ogre. Looks like he's only 2 pieces, so he should be easy to put together.
Yeah, I think that's the Ogre Champion you see fighting the knight on the front cover of the box. And he does look easy to assemble, just 2 pieces, front and back. But unfortunately, we only get one of him. But we do, however, get 10 Beastmen on this same sprue, as well as what looks like a Chaos Knight. So that's something. So here's a GW plastic orc from 92 that we looked at before, and I'm going to assume that the plastic is going to be slightly different since this was made for mass production. Not that this wasn't made for mass production, but they were going to probably crank these out in mass market quantities. And it just feels a little different. It's kind of hard to describe. Like this has a little more density to it, and this is a little more clicky. But yeah, it looks perfectly fine. I don't see a lot of flash on those sprues or anything, so they're actually pretty darn clean. The same goes for this Chaos Steed here. There's actually a fair amount of detail in the barding around the neck and in the horse's tail. It's almost as if Milton Bradley is using a GW-type mold with maybe just a slightly lower grade of plastic. But still, material differences aside, it's still above par from what you might expect from a typical board game release. All right, so here's the sprue with our Ogre Champion, 10 Beastmen, and 1 Chaos Knight. More orcs and goblins.
Imperial.
Yeah, this looks like our red sprue of Imperial missile troops. So it looks like we get about 5 crossbowmen and 10 archers. And that dude there looks like he's getting ready to fire a cannon, so he must be part of the cannon crew. Some have been removed, but I'm sure those are in those plastic bags. Chaos Warriors. And Chaos Archers. As you can see, they're all the same sculpt, and their shields are pretty flat, so that's meant to have a decal on there, though certainly you could paint your own emblem if you were so inclined. There's a closer look at the Chaos Archers. A little flash on the bow, obviously, but not a bad little sculpt. So now if I have some sort of a Chaos theme warband, I can throw a couple of Chaos Archers in there, so that's pretty cool. So here's the Empire Men-at-Arms. Obviously nothing too fancy, and they're all the same sculpt, but if you had some other Empire figures, if you had some kind of an Empire army, and you needed just a few basic troops to kind of round out your formations, these would work pretty well. Let's see, what else we got in here? Okay. These are bagged up. These were removed from the sprues, but that's okay. We knew what we were getting into. So these look like the wolves for the Wolf Riders. So there's one of the Chaos Knights, I guess. And the Knights slot right in. So Yeah, not quite the same quality as if you were getting a plastic GW set, obviously. But again, if you were rounding out some forces and you had some other more unique figures and you just needed to fill out the formation, these guys would be great. So this here looks like a mixed bag of Imperial Knights, Lord Knights, and Men-at-Arms. And I guess we could call these guys poor man's Bretonnians, maybe. It looks like somebody has already put some of the decals on these guys. And while I'm not a fan of the decals myself, I could certainly understand that if you're producing a mass market product and selling to a younger audience of perhaps non-painters, that's a sort of quick and dirty way to get some color on the battlefield. I think this is our cannon.
And your riders. Your wolf riders.
So there is the Empire Great Cannon, and then we have some Goblin Wolf Riders here.
Cannon looks pretty good.
Cannon's got a lot of little details on it. I'm pretty happy with that. Be nice to have about 10 of those. And here's how the Goblin kind of sits on that wolf. Yeah, you know, it is what it is. So I have used worse. And there's some nice fur on that wolf, and you can see his teeth and his eyes and everything like that. So definitely could put a little paint on that guy and he'd work out just fine. So everything looks better with a nice coat of paint on it. Okay, what else we got? Okay, here's some more horses, and we're starting to see the difference between the Chaos horses in gray and I assume the Empire horses without the horns on them. So, yeah. Different colored plastic for the horses, but I think they're all the same sculpt, essentially.
That's so if you have different players, they can each have their own color. Because it's 2 or more players, so.
Oh, okay, 2 or more players, yeah. So again, if you were looking for some cheap Bretonnians, that could work. Be nothing wrong with that. Though the Chaos Cavalry are a little bit more detailed. Okay, what else we got here? We got, movement trays. Yeah, they slot right in there. So that's one of the things you'd have to kind of figure out. You would have to, if you were going to rebase these guys, take into account the slots they have on there. Most of these guys, though, you could either just use a slot base or clip that tab on the bottom of the feet and just glue them directly to whatever base you wanted. And I assume you could dig up somewhere online some cavalry type slot bases that would accommodate these horses. Okay.
The flags.
There's a whole bunch of flags and stuff. And then this must be
the tower.
Our mighty tower. So that would be okay for some sort of keep or a monastery or something like that. It's just one building, basically. You can see the details a little bit soft, but again, once you painted it up and at 3 feet away, who's going to know?
And these must be walls or... Oh, and those are the more bases.
Yeah, more movement trays. So you can see here they've actually labeled the movement tray so you know exactly what unit you're dealing with.
Dice.
Dice. And of course, proprietary dice. If we ever make up our own game system, we'll have to figure out a way to use these. So you have shields and skulls and blanks. Quite a few little sheets of unused stickers, so I'm sure these could be used for something. All right, getting down to the bottom here. And we have...
That must be the playmat.
This is the playmat. We'll put that on the floor here in a minute. Let's just take a look at it in all its glory. Here we have some unpunched sheets of tokens and terrain tiles. Here's the rules. And assembly instructions. That's how you put together your 2-piece ogre.
How you put your 3-piece horse
Right.
and rider.
And the tower. All right, let's see what you got there. Cards. So this must be the Chaos Army deck, and there's a separate deck for the Imperials. I watched a few minutes of a sample game on YouTube, and I think these cards sort of help determine activation. So you flip cards up in the deck, and that determines who moves, I believe. Here's the Imperial deck, and I do believe this is part of their activation system, that you flip cards to determine what units get to go.
When a card is flipped over, any unit represented on the card may first move and then attack. Archers and crossbowmen, however, may only move or attack.
Yeah, from what I've read on Board Game Geek and a couple other places, really a simple game, not a lot of maths involved. But I guess if you're trying to sell something to kids, basically, and get them used to the concept of wargaming, that's probably a good way to do it, so no one gets too intimidated or frustrated because of the complexity. But it's sort of a launch pad, sort of a gateway game, if you will, to get them involved in wargaming in general. So I assume that sales didn't blow the doors off because they stopped making it at some point, but a valiant effort, I think. Yeah, so even though we paid $125 in 2020 dollars, and I'm not sure how that compares to the original MSRP in 1992 dollars, I'm reasonably certain that we'll get fair value out of this because there's a lot of guys in here that we can repurpose. They probably use the same molds in other games, but I haven't seen some of these guys like those Chaos Archers, so I'm pretty happy about that. But we'll get fair value out of it. Plus, we can always take the stuff we don't use and then sell it back as a parts game on eBay and tell people, here's what's gone, here's what you get, and recoup some of the money that way. So more than enough opportunity to get value out of it, and I'm looking forward to fielding some of these Empire crossbowmen and archers, and especially these Chaos Archers. Yeah, so what's your favorite part of all this?
The cannon and the cannon guys, and then the wolf riders.
Yeah, we'll have to make some Goblin Wolf Riders.
And I do like the Ogre Champion. He's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, he might have to get built and painted.
I think he will, yeah.
Okay, folks, before we wrap it up, we're going to show you one more thing. We're going to move our table here, and we're going to lay out this Battle Masters battle mat on the floor and maybe place a few movement trays and some figures to give you a sense of what it might have looked like back in 1992. Okay, so here it is. I put the yardstick on here for reference so you can see how big it is. And the Battle Masters battle mat is a little bit flimsy. It's kind of like that cheap plastic tablecloth you get at the party store, but I got to give these guys credit for ambition because they created something with a much larger scale than a typical board game. So, and here's a closer look at how the movement trays work with the horses slotted in there, and I'm not quite sure if you're supposed to remove horses as you take damage or not. And here's one of the double-sided terrain tiles that lets you actually change the map. So for instance, if we wanted to create a new river crossing, we just put that tile down there. For a mass market, self-contained board game type game, the scale of this thing is pretty impressive. And the one thought I have is, how often did some kid set up a huge game in the middle of the living room, and then he and his friend just left it there for several days, and so people are tiptoeing around it, or dad ends up stepping on a Chaos Warrior in his bare feet. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed our retro unboxing of the Battle Masters epic game of fantasy battles from Milton Bradley from way back in 1992, developed with Games Workshop. And no doubt you'll be seeing some of these retro Battle Masters soldiers pop up in some of our other games, maybe visiting the city of Frostgrave or Mordheim, or just a good old-fashioned game of Warhammer Fantasy Skirmish, which we intend to get to sometime here in the future. But until then, as always, thank you very much for watching. If you like the things we do here, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please give this video a big thumbs up. And of course, please visit us online at our website, skirmishwargames.com.